and 17. We're on our own 2 yard line. Better send for the Punt Team. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Punt Team, the Racing Post weekly NFL show. My name is Andrew Wilsher, joined as always by our NFL analyst, Luke Lindholm. Luke, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. We're a month into the NFL season now. Can't believe it's already October, but we're feeling good. Finally starting to see which teams will be Super Bowl contenders and maybe which teams are getting left behind. So I'm ready for another exciting week of action-packed football.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you touch on teams being left behind. Who would have thought they could be the Baltimore Ravens, obviously dropping to 1-3, losing to the Chiefs last week. But not only that, it looks like Lamar Jackson might be out for multiple weeks. So as much of a disaster as it gets for the Ravens, but what do you think of Baltimore? Firstly, let's touch on the fact that they lost to the Chiefs. So does that even keep them in as Super Bowl contenders? The fact that they've lost to the likes of the Bills, the Lions, and the Chiefs. But now with that Jackson injury, are Baltimore done?
I can't say they're done just yet. And I know last week I sounded the alarms in the Kansas City Chiefs, and obviously they just turned things around. So maybe I'll do that on the Ravens since I have them as a Super Bowl pick right now too. But yeah, the Lamar Jackson injury, that's going to be big for them. And especially when you look at the next 2 weeks, they play the Texans and Rams. Good enough. They're at home, so they do have a little bit of their fans behind them. But I do think they can still sneak into these playoffs, especially when you look at their schedule down the stretch. It was all really uploaded with these Super Bowl contenders, as you mentioned, the Bills, Lions, Chiefs. I mean, I would even say the Rams are Super Bowl contender in 2 weeks. But after that, they really, with or without Lamar, they really should be favored in every game down the stretch outside of week 17 at Green Bay. And I think not just the schedule, but you look in their division. Steelers have obviously impressed so far at 3-1, but the Browns are dealing with the quarterback change. I mean, you look at the Bengals, no Joe Burrow. This division is still wide open, so that's their kind of way to get in. And yeah, they're going to have to battle on the road, it looks like, in the playoffs, but I'm not completely out on the Ravens just yet.
Absolutely. You know what? I totally agree. If you take your mind back to a month ago when we were doing the season preview, I think I recommended that I do like the Ravens. I did like the Ravens to win the Super Bowl, but I recommended against betting them yet because they had such a tough start that I was convinced that you were going to be able to get a better number than the 6-1 on offer. I didn't quite account for Lamar getting injured, but as you say, after these next couple of games, in all honesty, I can still see them getting past the Texans. They haven't
Mhm.
they haven't been amazing on offense. But you take out these Texans and Rams games, and after that, their schedule is very straightforward, and I can definitely see them running the table. And the division is very winnable. You touched on the Bengals and Browns, but I haven't been overly impressed by the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers has looked very pedestrian. They made a lot of great additions, but they've really been muddling through. They've sort of stumbled their way into being 3-1. They should have lost that game against the Patriots. Arguably, should have lost against the Jets in Week 1. So I definitely think that Baltimore still has a chance, but then I suppose the question turns to whether, if they do make it to the playoffs, can they actually get through the playoffs? We've seen it for over
Yeah.
the past 5-6 years. When this team comes up against the top teams, they just can't get it done. So could that be an issue once we hit the postseason if they make it?
I think it can always be an issue with, playoff Lamar is starting to turn into a real narrative where he shows up in the regular season, then come playoff time, he's just not there. But it's almost he's never played it as an underdog in that sense. The Ravens have been a 1 or 2 seed outside of they're obviously trailing the Chiefs most years, but they've been home field advantage for most of their playoff runs, and then they come up short. So it's a whole new role for Lamar and this Ravens team that it almost feels like everyone's starting to forget about them. They've allowed the most points in the NFL through 4 weeks. That this is the first time we've seen Lamar be an underdog in that sense, maybe since his rookie season. So I do think they can beat them. The pressure will be removed from their shoulders a little bit, but the way Buffalo looks, especially, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just shifting back to the Steelers, they just beat the Vikings in the first ever game in Dublin. So again, they're now 3-1. Do you think that they have what it takes to contend for the AFC North, especially with the Jackson injury? And do you think that they can make it into the playoffs?
I do think they'll contend. I mean, I think they're going to end up falling short in the end. And you touched on it, but the way they've been winning is just not sustainable. Obviously, we saw DK Metcalf with that 80-plus reception to the house this past Sunday. But then also, they're just thriving off turnovers. They had another 7 points off an interception last week against Minnesota. And unlike Baltimore, when you look at their schedule, the back half is absolutely loaded. They have the Packers in week 8. They play the Colts in week 9. They go to the Chargers week 10, home against the Bills in week 13, and at the Lions in week 16. Those are 5 or 6 playoff teams that are not going to be easy for the Steelers team, and they've benefited from playing the Jets, the Patriots, those teams that are kind of on the fringe of the playoffs or have no chance. So I'm not buying into the hype whatsoever, and I haven't been impressed with Rodgers either.
Cool. And then just shifting gears over to the NFC, we had a battle with 3-0 teams when the Eagles visited Florida to take on the Bucs. Philadelphia came away with the win, so they stay perfect at 4-0. Only them and the Bills are unbeaten right now. What's your view on this Philadelphia team?
Man, I'm still not sold on their offense. You saw it. They looked great in that first half against Tampa Bay, and then just nothing in the second half. And we almost had another great Baker comeback there in the second half. So I'm not sold on this Philly team, much more sold on Buffalo when it comes to the undefeated teams. And honestly, it's been a funny year, and dating back to last season, NFL closing favorites of 6 points or more are 16, 2-1 straight up this season. And when you look back to week 13 of last year, they're 56, 6-1. So we've just been seeing big favorites winning more so again and again. Obviously, the Bills have fallen into that category more so than the Eagles this year with their schedule. But the Eagles offense, Saquon's struggling out of the gate. He's averaging less than 3.5 yards per carry, not looking like last year. And Jalen Hurts, it seems we're only getting one half from him in these games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They've been very inconsistent, haven't they? They laid an egg in that first half against the Rams last week before coming back, and then the week after, again, couldn't quite get it rolling against the Bucs. So it waits to be seen if Philly can bring it all together. I mean, the fact that they're 4-0 without playing amazingly well, it makes me scared that if they do finally lock in, better watch out. But yeah, it's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure. So shifting gears to our game previews, and the first matchup on Sunday takes place from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. It sees the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Vikings obviously fell in Dublin last week. They've stayed over around the UK, and they'll be lining up, so that could give them a bit of an advantage. But the big news is that Cleveland will be starting Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, their rookie out of Oregon. So it's going to be Carson Wentz versus Dylan Gabriel. Luke, what do you make of that news?
Yeah, I'm sure that's why everyone's buying their tickets to see Wentz Gabriel. But it's definitely an interesting storyline, especially a rookie making his debut overseas. It's kind of unsettling if I were a Browns fan.
No,
But
definitely.
also, and the same thing, as you mentioned it, Minnesota comes in with that unique edge here with them playing overseas in Dublin. They're already acquainted to the time difference, which I do think plays a big role in these games. We don't have much history looking at where that's happened to teams. Only the Jaguars have played back-to-back overseas games in 2023 and 2024, and they went 2-0 against the spread, and they were leading at halftime and the end of regulation in both games. So that familiarity is definitely big. I talked about it a bit last week too, but the favorites have historically done well in international spots. Obviously, Minnesota bucked that trend last week, losing the Steelers, but they're still 36-14 straight up, and they've covered nearly 2/3 of the time. So I think the trends definitely point to Minnesota, and this Cleveland offense has just been flat out bad. I mean, they're averaging just 14 points per game, which is 31st in the league. I do think you can expect some sort of boost with Gabriel in the lineup. Minnesota hasn't had any film on him outside of what they've seen at Oregon. So there's always that unfamiliarity. We saw it with Jake Browning earlier this year with the Bengals in his first start. But the first half production from Cleveland this year specifically has been god awful. They're averaging just 5 points per game in that first half, which is dead last in the NFL. And they've trailed by at least 4 points at halftime in every single game this season. So when it comes to a pick, I like Minnesota's kind of familiarity being overseas. Obviously, the rookie making his debut may take him a half to kind of get used to NFL speed. So I'm backing the Vikings to cover the first half spread minus 2.5 at 10-11 this weekend in London.
Yep, I like it. I like it. To be honest, for my pick, I'm going to be rooting there for a big Browns second half comeback, because I'm actually taking the Browns plus 3.5. I do take your point. It's with Vikings having the time zone advantage, and I think traditionally teams that come over with the 5-hour difference, they can be a bit slow starting in the first and second quarter. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see the Vikings leading at halftime, but I really do love this Browns defense. We have an over-under of 36, so points points should be at a premium in this one, and that always makes me lean towards the underdog, especially when they're getting a field goal, because getting those 3.5 points means a lot more if it's a game of only 20, 30 points and if it's 50, 60, So
Mhm.
that's a big element. But I love this Cleveland defense, man. Like, they keep showing up. They've had such a brutal start. They've had to face Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff in their first 4 games, and yet this team is still allowing the 4th fewest passing yards in the NFL. On top of
Mhm.
that, they've allowed the fewest yards per carry at just 2.7 yards. Like, this team is stopping everyone. They're standing up, and now they get to take on Carson Wentz. Wentz isn't going to be the guy, in my opinion, to cut through this Browns defense. And you need to factor in the fact that no team has been sacked more than the Vikings. They've suffered 18 sacks this season.
Mhm.
Miles Garrett is going to be feasting on Carson Wentz, forcing him into mistakes, in my opinion. The Browns have 15 sacks this season, which has them in the top 10. I really think that Wentz is going to be uncomfortable, and Minnesota's really going to struggle to get those chains moving. Obviously, that then means that I need the Browns offense to step it up a gear. And as you say, Dylan Gabriel is an unknown commodity, but I think that he's the sort of player that could step up to the occasion. And if things aren't going amazingly, he has Quinshon Judkins that he can lean on, who has put up so far 61, 94, and 82 rushing yards. That could be the key to victory. I'm not saying the Browns are going to win this one, but I can see it being a very tight, low-scoring game where maybe a late Minnesota field goal makes a difference, but that still cashes a Browns plus 3.5 ticket. So that's the way I'm leaning.
Yeah, and if you like the Browns in this one, I grabbed it actually right before or right around when the news came out. Dylan Gabriel to win Offensive Rookie of the Year was sitting at around 75 to 1, which if you looked at last week with the Giants, Jackson Dart was sitting 20 to 1, played one game, beat the Chargers. He's down to about 6 to 1, 13 to 2 now. So it's worth a little flyer if you believe in this Browns team, especially this weekend in London.
Absolutely. And just to touch on that as well, we know how poor the Browns offense has been, which could work in Gabriel's favor. If he comes in and now this Browns offense steps up, it doesn't have to be amazing, but if it just shows clear improvement on what Flacco's been doing, then that could really work in Gabriel's favor for winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. So immediately following the Vikings-Browns game from London, we have a clash between the Denver Broncos and the Philadelphia Eagles kicking off at 6 p.m. Eagles come into this one as 4-point favourites. And I'm going to be honest, Luke, I really like the Eagles here. As un as unamazed as I've been from their performances so far this season, this team just knows how to win games. And I'm surprised that them being at home, this spread is only around the 3.5, 4 point mark. Ultimately, like, that would imply that if this game was on a neutral field, then the spread would pretty much be a pick'em, and I just don't see it. I do not have this Broncos team being on the same level as the Eagles. You know how vocal I've been of how unimpressed I am by Denver, and a 28-3 victory over a Burrowless Bengals team isn't going to change my mind on that. Ultimately, I still have a lot of reservations about Bo Nix and the efficiency of this Broncos offense, and I have been pleasantly surprised by the Eagles defense so far. And while the Philly offense, as we've alluded to already, has been very like start stop, I have to believe that Saquon Barkley is going to come right and run all over a team eventually. Jalen Hurts has been incredibly efficient so far, and you need to factor in as well that Denver played on Monday night, so they're coming into this one on a short week, and they're heading into the Lions' den that is Lincoln Financial Field. Ultimately, Philadelphia, over the past year, a year plus, their record is 20-1, so they know how to win games. And in fact, that one defeat was when Jalen Hurts had to exit the game early, and they lost to the Commanders. So in the past year, when Jalen Hurts has played the full game, this Eagles team is undefeated. So with all that in mind, I really like Philadelphia to cover the spread around minus 3.5, 4 points at home against the Broncos. What way are you looking?
Now, I know how low you are on this Denver team, but I'm kind of on the other side of the fence where, I mean, they're 2-2 right now. But if you take away a leverage call against the Colts, which again, what the hell is leverage? And then you look at their game against the Chargers where you needed heroics from Justin Herbert, this team could easily be 4-0. I will obviously not going to take too much from that Monday Night Football performance, like you said, against the Bengals, but the defense really got after it. They're only giving up 16.8 points per game, which is tied for second best in the league. And as you mentioned, the run defense specifically is going to be very big in this one. They sit just outside the top 10 in rushing defense. And obviously, this Eagles team is going to want to run the football, especially given the inconsistency with Jalen Hurts' arm this season. And the formula for the Broncos this year has really been limiting passing yards. When you look at their games, in their 2 games that they've won, they've allowed just under 119 passing yards per game. And then in the 2 losses, they gave up over 300 in both of them. So I do think they're going to try and force Hurts to beat them with his arm. If he can, I can definitely see the Eagles covering in the situation. But if he's throwing a lot in this game, he really hasn't done well throughout his career. When he's attempted 39 or more passes, he's just 1-6, which the Eagles know that. It's not a recipe for success. So I don't expect them just to rely on Hurts' arm. But I do think that the Broncos defense can really get after him. And if they slow the rush defense down in that first half, they're going to force Hurts to throw. All in all, I can't really argue against backing the Eagles at home, especially with Hurts' record as the starter. And even if you look over at Bo Nix, he's just 4-7 against the spread as an underdog his career, and he's dropped 4 straight in that role. So when it comes down to a side, I am high in this Broncos defense, but I'm not convinced that Nix will be able to walk into Philadelphia and really ball out. So I'm going to go with the under 43.5 in this one. The numbers say Philly should bounce back after a rough offensive second half last week, but I think it's going to be tight early. And ultimately, I think the Eagles win in a close matchup, maybe by a field goal. I wouldn't be surprised if they cover the spread, but I can't see this game seeing more than 44 points in this one. So I'm going under 43.5 in Philadelphia.
And immediately following the Broncos Eagles game, we have an NFC battle between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Seahawks. The over-under is 44.5, while the spread is set at 3.5 points in the Seahawks' favor. Luke, last week we obviously saw the Bucs fizzle out against the Eagles. They almost pulled off the comeback. We nearly saw some more Baker magic, but unfortunately didn't quite pan out, while the Seahawks won that game against the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football with a last-second field goal. Both teams very interesting at the moment, but what's your view on this game?
So this one is pretty tricky when you're looking at it on paper. I mean, Seattle, as we said, has started the year looking really solid. They had obviously the win last week against the Cardinals, but they really haven't beaten a great team just yet. Their other 2 wins came against the Steelers at home and then at the Saints. And those 3 teams aren't exactly powerhouses in the NFL. There are a couple of weird trends heading into this matchup. For some reason, Seattle, every time they beat Arizona, they tend to slip up the following week. They've won 8 straight against the Cardinals, but going back to 2018, they're just 3-7 against the spread in their next game.
Wow.
It also, you always think of Seattle kind of having that extra man with the fans going crazy in the way sound funnels through that stadium. But under Mike McDonald, they really haven't been too good in Seattle. They struggle to cover number. They're only 3-8 against the spread in his 11 home games and 4-7 straight up. So I'm all in on the Seattle defense, really. But the offense, I'm not completely sold on. I mean, we talked about Cooper Kupp coming in the offseason, but his production has quietly dropped year over year. When you look back to his big season in 2022 with the Rams, he had a positive separation score, which is how easily he can get open, of over 28%. And this season, it's down to 13.3%. So Sam Darnold, it looks like he has weapons on paper, but Kupp has really been a non-factor, and Jackson Smith-Njigba has been the one who's stepped up in this one. So if he can get taken away by Tampa Bay, I think it's a big chance for the Bucs to win outright, especially on the spread. You look at Baker as an underdog. He's 15-8 against the spread as an underdog in Tampa, and he's covered by nearly 6 points per game in those 15 contacts. So Seattle, I'd say on paper, has looked like the better team, but when you look at who they've played, and I really think this game should be below a field goal, kind of closer to a pick 'em. If it's in Seattle, they're getting the extra 2-3 points. But I'll back the Bucs to cover the plus 3.5 at 10-11 this week. And let's hope that I can get 2 halves from this Bucs team instead of some comeback they need or some blown lead that they've shown through 4 weeks so far. But I still like them enough to take Tampa plus 3.5.
Yep, no, absolutely. If you remember last week, I took the Bucks plus 3.5 against the Eagles and didn't quite pan out. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. Although I do like the Bucks catching a field goal here. Instead, I'm going to look to the over of 44.5 points. Ultimately, I just think this line is way too low when you look at the quality of both offenses and arguably what both offenses have shown so far this season. It feels like every week that I talk about how much I love Baker Mayfield, so I'm not going to bore you with all of that again. Otherwise, I fear that he might actually put a restraining order out on me. But ultimately, this season, he's got an 8-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's got the third most touchdown passes in the NFL behind Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff, and he almost pulled the Bucks back into it last week. This Bucks team has an embarrassment of riches at wideout. I know Mike Evans is out, but Emeka Egbuka just continues to flourish every week, and they've got Chris Godwin back now, and even at running back, Bucky Irvin, Rashad White, working very well as a tandem. The last two Bucks games have seen 56 points scored in each, and that isn't really something that surprises me given the Buccaneers' talent on offense. But they've also had some issues running through them on defense. We saw the Jets carve through them a couple of weeks ago, so they are vulnerable. And I certainly think that Sam Darnold and the Seahawks can take advantage of that. The Seahawks are tied first for the most passing yards per attempt in the NFL. We've seen Darnold be a massive gunslinger. He's created a great rapport with Jackson Smith and Jigba right from the off. Like obviously he's only been with the team for 4 games, but it looks like he's been playing with Jackson for years almost. And I've touched on it previously, where like these top receivers having another threat to keep defenses honest and stop them piling on them. And although Cooper Kupp has taken a step back, I really think that he is helping Smith and Jigba flourish because defenses cannot leave Cooper Kupp alone. So that enables them to flourish. Ultimately, between Baker and Darnold, we have two gunslinging QBs full of talent and absolutely flourishing this season. We've got too much star power on both sides. So, with all of that considered, I'm very surprised that this over-under is as low as it is. I expected it to come in around the 47-48 mark, so I'll gladly take over 44.5 points. And then the last game on Sunday Night Football, sees the New England Patriots taking on the Buffalo Bills in an AFC East matchup, bringing to a close 14 straight hours of NFL goodness on Sunday night. The Patriots are 7.5-point touchdown underdogs, but they did crush the Panthers last week to get back to 2-2. Luke, they're your boys. What way are you going on this one?
Man, about time this offense came out flying last week. I mean, and honestly, from the offensive perspective, the Patriots have looked really good this season. They had the 5 turnovers against Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, but Drake May has been fantastic. He's leading the NFL right now in completion rate at 74%, which is the second highest through 4 games in Patriot history, behind only Tom Brady in 2007 when he won MVP. So again, not going to compare the two right now, but May is looking like the future quarterback in New England. And this is actually his primetime debut. I think it was the first time I've seen the Patriots for years now on Sunday Night Football. And there was a picture of Drake May up there instead of Belichick or one of our defensive players.
Yeah.
It feels good that the offense is finally coming together. And as good as May has played, I really think the Pats need to get their running game going in this one. Buffalo's allowing 164.3 rushing yards per game, which is 31st in the league. And if they can get Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson the ball early and successful, that should only open up the game more for May. On the flip side, I know they played well against the Panthers last week, but defensively, I'm still not sold on this secondary for the Pats. They're still allowing nearly 242 passing yards per game, which is 26 in the NFL. But we did get Christian Gonzalez back in the secondary last week, which, again, I think Carolina, he still wasn't 100%, looked a little slow in some plays, but he should be fully ready to go for this Buffalo game, and it can't be kind of stated enough how important he will be to take away either Khalil Shaquille, Dalton Kincaid. I don't think they'll line up with him against Coleman, but he's going to be big for the secondary. When it comes down to the game, I really do like the Patriots to cover the first half spread in this one at plus 5.5, 10-11. The numbers, they've played Buffalo really good in the first half. It remains to be seen whether they can put up 2 second halves. But Josh Allen in his 14 games against the Pats is just 5-9 against the first half spread. and he's lost 5 straight first half spreads against the Patriots. The Bills weren't leading in either of their meetings last week when they played the Pats. And the Patriots offense this season has dropped off a bit after halftime. They rank in the top 7 in first half scoring compared to just 18th in the second half. So I do like the Patriots plus 7.5 for the game, but I'd rather just take them in that first half spread and get that at 5.5. You're only losing, 2 points. Obviously, going over 7 is a big deal, but I'd much rather see the value here. The Patriots cover that first half spread versus the full game. So yeah, give me the Pats first half. And as you know, I will be playing them on the full game, but more of the money going in that first half plus 5.5 spread.
Yep, no, makes sense. And I think we saw it when the Bills played the Dolphins as well. Like, they were very slow starting in that first half before taking control of the game in the second half. And I can certainly see Josh Allen being a bit pedestrian or just like a bit slow starting in this one. So yeah, I do like that pick a lot. But ultimately, like, the Bills have struggled to cover these big spreads as well. Like, we saw it last week against the Saints as well. The Saints were pushing them quite far in that fourth quarter before they eventually pulled away, and it was the same against Miami. The Bills are winning, but they're not as dominant as maybe they might have expected to be. And ultimately, I don't think that the Patriots can be discounted. It hurts me as a Jets fan to say that, but Drake May is annoyingly good, and this offense really is progressing nicely. You mentioned it, that obviously he put up 42 points on the Panthers, but he had those 5 turnovers against the Steelers. If the ball security was a bit better, we could have seen them hit another 30 points in that game easily. And then the week before that, they put up 33 points on the Dolphins. This offense looks capable of scoring at will, and that always makes me concerned when taking a team to win by more than a touchdown. So I'm going to leave the spread alone, and instead I'm looking at targeting Dalton Kincaid to score a touchdown for the Bills at around 23-10. And it sort of factors into some of the points that you've already made around how the Patriots' passing defense hasn't been amazing. Mm-hmm. They've already allowed the 4th most passing yards per attempt and completion percentage, 4th highest completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. So they've been having issues there. But more importantly, they've allowed the 7th most receiving yards to tight ends in the NFL this season, and already giving up 2 touchdowns. Looking at Kincaid, he's actually found the end zone in 3 of 4 Buffalo Bills games so far this season. He only had 1 reception last week, but that was for 28 yards and a touchdown. So he's making the most of his opportunities. And given that how much the Patriots have struggled in defending tight ends so far, I think that Allen's going to be leaning on him a bit more. Should see him get quite a few receptions, and around 23-10. I think that he has a lot of value to find the end zone, especially with the over-under at 49 and a half.
Very high.
The bookies are projecting a bit of a shootout in this game. We could see it going back and forth, so could be a lot of touchdowns to go around. I like Kincaid to be the reason for one of them. And now it is time for our big game treble, where the Punt Team, myself and Luke, give you our 3 picks for the day's televised games to hopefully deliver you a nice winner. This one comes in at around 9-2. And to start us off, we're looking to London, where we're going to be taking the Browns plus 3.5. The Browns defense has been utterly tremendous. They've allowed the 4th fewest passing yards in the NFL, despite facing an absolute murderer's row of elite quarterbacks. They've faced Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff, and yet they've still managed to keep all of those QBs in check. And now they get to go up against Carson Wentz, who, in all honesty, he had a lot of passing yards last week, but that was mainly because of the Vikings playing from behind. He still looked incredibly shaky. The Vikings have suffered the most sacks in the NFL, and that always spells danger when you're going up against the Browns defense, and more importantly, Myles Garrett. I think Garrett is going to be chasing Carson Wentz all over Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, forcing Wentz to make some mistakes. So ultimately, I really like the Browns to at least keep this one within a field goal. Browns plus 3.5 in what should be a low-scoring game. Following on from that, at 6 p.m., we're looking to Broncos versus Eagles, and we are taking the Eagles to win this one straight up. First things first, the Eagles are 20-1. They've won 20 and lost only 1 game over the past year, and that only defeat came when Jalen Hurts had to exit the game early in a defeat to the Washington Commanders last December. So In the past calendar year, when Jalen Hurts has played the full game, the Eagles are undefeated. I can't see the Broncos coming into Lincoln Financial Field to be the team that's going to buck that trend. They're playing on a short week. They played on Monday Night Football against the Bengals, and their offense has suffered some efficiency issues. So, yeah, give me the Eagles to win this one and take down the Broncos for the second leg of our treble. Luke, bring us home.
Third leg, again, I'm taking a team just underdogs by just over a field goal, and that's the Bucks plus 3.5 in Seattle. So again, Seattle is just 3-7 against the spread following their game against the Cardinals in the last 10 meetings. So there's a bit of an Arizona hangover with the Seahawks team. And at home, they really haven't been impressive under Mike McDonald. They're just 3-8 against the spread and 4-7 straight up in those 11 home games since he's taken over. And then finally, love the trend of Baker as an underdog. In Tampa, he is 15-8 against the spread as an underdog. He's covered it by 5.6 points per game. So I love him getting the points. And this is their first kind of opportunity to bounce back after last week's Philadelphia. They're 3-1. They really want to take a stranglehold on this NFC South. So I think the Bucks could even win outright, but we'll take them plus 3.5 to close out our treble.
So there you go. We're taking the Browns plus 3.5, the Eagles to win, and the Buccaneers plus 3.5, around 9-2. Let's bring it home. And now it's time to dive into the Punt Team player prop double, where Luke and I pick out one player prop each that we like and parlay it into a double. I'm going to start things off, and I'm going with Geno Smith to have over 1.5 passing touchdowns at 5-4. Geno's really been letting loose in Pete Carroll's system. He's already gone over this number in his last 2 games against the Commanders and the Bears. He's had 5 total passing touchdowns, and he's just really turned into a gunslinger. Now he gets to come up against a Colts defense that against the pass has looked very vulnerable. In 2 of their last 3 games, they've allowed 3 passing touchdowns. We saw Jared Goff get 375 passing yards and 3 passing scores against him. And we also saw Bo Nix put up 3 passing touchdowns. Sandwiched in between that, we did see them hold Cam Ward and the Titans to only 1 passing touchdown, but that was actually Ward's best performance as a starting quarterback so far. And outside of that game, he's been god-awful in his other 3 starts. So It's really not a good look for the Colts passing defense. And another avenue that we saw last week in the Raiders' loss to the Bears is that he threw a couple of balls to Ashton Gianti last week, which counted for passing touchdowns. So that's another route that we could see them go down. We've got an over-under of 48 points. So touchdowns, it looks like there's going to be touchdowns in this game. And the way that Geno's been throwing that ball around, I'm very surprised that this is available at odds against. So I'm taking Geno Smith over 1.5 passing touchdowns at 5-4. How about you, Luke?
So I'm actually looking over to that game in London, and I'm absolutely loving Jordan Mason under 72.5 rushing yards at 5-6. So we've already talked about this Browns defense, and specifically that's rushing defense, which is currently the best in the NFL. They already held top running backs like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Chase Brown to an average of just 32 rushing yards per game. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs did have 90-plus rushing yards last week against them, but that was in a positive script for the Lions. They were obviously up big, so could just hand the ball off again and again. With such a low total and a close spread, I don't see Minnesota running away in that game. And Mason has really only cleared this number of 72.5 once this season, which came in their blowout win against the Bengals, who their rush defense is non-existent. It ranks 26 in the NFL. So with the total sitting at just around 36, I'm not expecting any fireworks in London. And with this Browns front 7 that has really just stopped the rush all season, it's hard to see Mason hitting this total. So I am gladly backing Jordan Mason under 72.5 rushing yards at 5-6 this week.
So there you go. Geno Smith over 1.5 passing touchdowns and Jordan Mason under 72 rushing yards. And now it's time for the Punt Team's best bets of the entire week. This is where myself and Luke go head-to-head and give our best bets of the entire NFL Week 5 slate. I'm currently leading 2-1. I've cashed each of my last 2 best bets, while Luke, you were unfortunately stung by 0.5 point on your pick last week. So let's see if you can bring it back this week. What have you got for your best bet?
Man, seriously, 1 point on both sides of us, but have to tip my cap. You got the win, so I'm ready to bounce back this week. And I am taking the Titans plus 7.5 at 10-11. So if you're backing this bet, you're going to have to kind of close your eyes, hold your nose. And as Cam Ward openly criticized this team earlier the week, said that Tennessee, quote, we ass. So that's how the Titans feel right now. Obviously, morale feels a little bit low, but to see a rookie quarterback come out and criticize his team like that in an interview, I do think we're going to get some sort of response from this Tennessee squad. And the other thing is, I just hate Kyler Murray as a favorite. I always like, if you look at the numbers and his against the spread, when he has been a home favorite, he's just 9-14 against the spread. Last week we talked about how good he is as an underdog. And this would be the biggest line that Murray has closed as a favorite since 2021 if it stays above that 7 number. Additionally, I wouldn't dissuade you from taking the Titans in the first half specifically. Murray is just 34-53. That's 39% against the spread in the first half. And on extended rest, which we know since the Cardinals played Thursday night last week, he's just 6-10 on the first half spread. So extra rest doesn't seem to be a factor. In fact, he's probably playing a little bit too much Call of Duty in those extra days off. So I do like the Titans. And you might think, is this too many points for two teams that are honestly not good? Teams that are 0-4 straight up or worse facing a team that is 500 or below are 20-11 against the spread since 2018. So that would be the Titans in this case, and they've covered by an average of 2.7 points. The final bit I have is that the Cardinals, obviously coming off a close loss in Thursday Night Football, the Titans were absolutely dominated against the Texans last week. They were shut out, but you're never as good as last week. You're never as bad as last week. We saw earlier this season the Falcons were shut out against the Panthers in Week 3. They came back and then beat the Commanders as underdogs in Week 4. So I do think this is a perfect kind of buy low. I'm not sure how much lower the Titans can get this season, but I'm going to expect Cam Ward and his teammates to kind of bounce back and keep this game within a touchdown.
That's interesting that you go that way because I'm actually going with the Cardinals minus 7.5 at 10-11 for my best bet. Who knew that Titans versus Cardinals would have so much riding on it this Sunday? The game of the week, I'm telling you. But I really like this Cardinals team minus 7.5. I do take on board all the points that you made, but the one trend that I need to point to since the start of the 2024 season, the Titans are 3-19 against the spread. 3-19. They've covered the spread three times in 22 games. Even the most devout Titans fan that backs their team every week must be getting pretty disgruntled with their team right now. So that alone immediately makes me look to the Cardinals. But obviously that isn't the only reason. The Cardinals, they have been a bit of an enigma this season, but I think people are being a bit too down on them about the fact that they've only beaten the Saints and the Panthers this season. You can only beat what's in front of you, and it's worth bearing in mind that they did lose to the 49ers and Seahawks in the last minute. So this team could very easily have been 4-0 if you can believe it. So worth factoring that in. But man, I am so down on Cam Ward. I remember a few weeks ago that I took his under on his passing yards, and that was an easy cash. This guy has eclipsed 175 passing yards only once in 4 games, and last week he had a 38.5% completion percentage. I know that he's calling his team ass, but the guy needs to look in the mirror right now because he isn't exactly lining it up himself. This Cardinals defense is ranking in the top 10 against passing yards per attempt and touchdowns allowed. So I am very confident that they'll be able to keep Cam Ward in check. They just put up 0 points against the Texans. Granted, the Texans have an elite defense, it looks like, this season, but I really like the Cardinals team as well to keep them in check. You touched on the fact that they have had extra prep time after playing in Thursday Night Football last week. Kyler could be playing more Call of Duty, or he could be getting locked in. Who knows? But the fact that we're getting Arizona with extra rest, playing at home against a Titans team that has been so woeful, I really like the Cardinals to win by at least a touchdown. And I'll wrap up by saying as well that I can see Trey Benson having a big game for Arizona. A lot of people liked him last week against the Seahawks with James Conner going down, but I think it all came a bit too soon for him, bearing in mind that they were playing on a short week. So now that Benson has had a week and a half to really get acclimatized to being the starting running back for the Cardinals, I can see him having a strong game as well. So I would also be looking towards his player props for this game, but overall, I love it. Cardinals minus 7.5 against the Titans.
Got a proper head-to-head.
Can't wait. And so there we have it. That is the Punt Team's best bets for NFL Week 5 coming up this Sunday. Remember to like, subscribe, and above all else, comment on this video. Tell us whether you like mine and Luke's selections, whether you're Team Luke with Titans plus 7.5 or Team Wilsh with minus 7.5 on the Cardinals. And also tell us your best bets for this Sunday's games. But until then, if you're ever in a bind and you're 4th and 7 on your own 39-yard line, remember to send for the Punt Team. Thank you very much.